Thank you for your patience, but I'd like to call this meeting to order for the regular session of the Oversight Board for Consolidated Communications Center at 9 a.m. on Thursday, June 1st, 2023. Roll call, please, Mr. Veeder.
Cedar Falls Mayor Green.
Here.
Dunkerton Mayor Shares.
Here.
Evansdale Mayor Kabliska.
Here.
Gilbertville Mayor Tomey.
Here.
Hudson Mayor Wessel.
Here.
Port City Mayor Gaston.
Here.
Waterloo Mayor Hart.
Here.
Supervisor Hall. Supervisor Schwartz.
Here.
Supervisor Little. Supervisor Trelka.
Here.
Supervisor Leyland.
Here. Thank you. Item 2 is the agenda received as proposed or amended.
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor, say aye.
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 Opposed, same sign. The agenda is received as proposed. Item number 3 is status of the fiscal year 22 refund payments. And once Tim Jameson learned that we were going to have a meeting today, he came and asked if he could do a report or kind of an update on this 22 refund.
Yeah, Tim Jameson, Real Estate Tax Manager. Just want to let everybody know that we were going to be sending out checks to your finance directors and city clerks this month for the fiscal year 22, I guess, wasn't a shortfall, unspent money from the budget that year. Your clerks and finance directors are probably more familiar with it, but typically we do this every October. Once we close on the fiscal year, if we have any money left over, it goes back to you guys. We ran into some cash flow issues when we put Consolidated Communications in a fiduciary fund, so we wanted to hang on to that money longer. But we are going to be sending that out. It combined is just under $80,000. So you should be, your clerks and your finance directors will be getting those probably within a couple of weeks. So if anybody has any questions, let me know. Thanks.
Thank you, Tim. Item number 4, update on Iowa statewide interoperability communication system. And Supervisor Trelka has some information he wanted to share, and then it's open for discussion.
Well, I know it's no secret that Cedar Falls is discussing potentially going off on their own. And that's not beyond the realm of possibility, because you and I police are on the state system. I don't think it would be that difficult for Cedar Falls to hop on it. They, of course, would have additional expenses for personnel cost. And I've talked to several of the mayors about the if Cedar Falls is going to look at the state system, should we look at the state system? Motorola is their contractor, that's their vendor for the state system. They are going to be in Blackhawk County on June 14th doing some coverage tests, because the two biggest questions, based on the feedback I'm getting, is cost and coverage, cost and coverage. In regard to our current system, I mean, two perfect storms came together, and that was adding personnel and the cost associated with our Raycom contract. I mean, one term I've heard is sticker shock with what it's costing us. And when I look at my notes and look at the minutes from past meetings, I mean, dispatch's budget went up, if I'm not mistaken, about 20 or 21% when we're talking about this next fiscal year. And that's not even considering the 125 and 150% that was discussed amongst the mayors and members of the Board of Supervisors. And that did not even include the capital improvement costs that were unknown, because there was talk of adding offices, tearing down walls. It's just not sustainable. Now, if anybody took action to get on the state system, I venture to say it would take 2 or 3 years for that to occur. But it's something we need to start talking about now, or considering. I'm not saying it's going to happen, but we have to be aware of our options. So we need to get as much information as possible, because here it is June 1st and we're still talking about a budget that was supposed to be decided last November. 5 months from now, we're going to be talking about it. Many mayors are hanging their hat on the EMA levy. It's not going to happen this next year. There's not legislative time. And I venture to say the bill is going to look, the final law is going to look much different than the pending bill. And I would venture to say there's going to be involvement from the Board of Supervisors in that decision if it comes to what needs to be accomplished. And I think I speak for the board when I say we're not receptive to an EMA levy, even though for years I've supported a countywide EMA levy. So we need to consider all options. The one thing I'd like to see and I think we need to have these meetings more frequently, at least quarterly, because I'm still hoping for some sort of compromise, and I have no idea what that compromise is going to look like because there are a lot of cooks in the kitchen. No matter what's decided, somebody's going to think it's unfair. But we have to consider all options. So there's the update. On the next agenda item, there's going to be more points to be discussed, but the bottom line with my agenda item is Motorola's going to be in Blackhawk County June 14th to do a coverage test. I encourage anybody here to talk to a state trooper to see what coverage is like. I know I have, and I was surprised talking to a trooper last week. I said, "How's your coverage?" He says, "It's great." I said, "Yeah, but you don't get in many buildings, do you?" And he says, "No, we don't." And but he did add, he was surprised he was able to get great coverage with his portable in the basement of the courthouse. And that surprised me, because for me to get coverage on my cell phone, I have to stand at a window. So they'll be here June 14th, and the answers I need is, okay, what's the coverage? And if we need to build upon the backbone of the state system, what's the cost? So I will get those two answers and keep everybody apprised.
That's what I was going to ask, what next steps would be with them being here, and if is there some point where we all should have them invited to a meeting and hear more about it? Or
yeah, that's been brought up too. I mean, and a representative from one of our vendors is here, Raycom. A representative from Raycom is here. It might not be I think this oversight board should meet at least quarterly, and maybe at one of those meetings we get a presentation from Motorola and we get a presentation from Raycom, so we can get our questions answered. Because I have questions.
Madam Chair, may I ask a question?
Oh, yes, please.
Good morning. Good morning to everyone. Just really quickly, two things. Supervisor Trelka, you indicated that countywide EMA levy for this. We know we've already voted for valuations for 24, but are you thinking that the Board of Supervisors, even in 25, would not look at a levy?
I venture to say that is correct.
I would say I think we need a lot more information, I guess, before we'd make that decision. I think early on in the process last year when we started going through that, as a EMA commission member, was that I was certainly open to exploring it and that we needed a lot more information, and I hadn't thought we'd gone down that route enough to say that yes, this is what the recommendation would even be in talking with the county. So I would say yes, to me it's very premature to think we'd do that in 25, because typically, and I know we made exceptions for it last year, we submit that budget in November and should be submitting it in November, and we thought that this was maybe going to change and there would be the county EMA levy and that would go through, and so we kind of delayed everything till actually February. So to get us back on track to where we would need to be in this, I don't think we're early enough in this process, but if something along the way here proves us wrong, I'm certainly still willing to, like I said, whether it's meeting quarterly or gathering more information, but to say it'd be ready for 25, I just don't see how that would be.
Okay.
And
Yeah, I'm sorry.
That's just me.
I would just remark that I'm still open to all possibilities and timelines, but there's definitely work to be done sooner than later to be able to make it happen if it were to happen in 25.
Okay. Yeah, just wondering because, that's part of something that, I think the mayors were in one place, and then, of course, the board, supervisors. So I guess, when we're talking about taking a look at keeping all options open, is it even worth talking about that if the stance is we're not going to do it? So that's what I was wondering. So, and then number two, if Cedar Falls leaves the system, they've miraculously worked it out, how does that have an impact on consolidated services between the cities that are still working with the county? How does that have an impact Does anybody on the board, supervisors or finance or anyone know how this would impact the rest of the communities?
Well, they have to give a year notice, so
Which they've
that,
done.
so that would give the rest of the communities a year to figure out what the plan's gonna be.
And that could be with any partner, obviously. Anyone could give that type of notice, but I guess we're thinking the three critical ones would be the county or the two cities. When you're asking that question, Mayor, is there anything specific you're thinking of? Because I said, obviously, we should put some thought into that if that were to ever happen, whether it be Cedar Falls or anyone else. But I don't know if that's been done previously.
Yeah, what we haven't done, we've had big talk in Waterloo that we're going to look into it. I think for us, whether it is hiring a consultant or something, I think we really need to take a look at our options, first of all. But what I was really wondering though is like, because Cedar Falls pays a portion of this, how does that have an impact financially on the other cities? Do our rates go up? Do they go down? That's what I want to know, because if the second largest player in all of this is gone, how does that puzzle fit together? You know, I'm not asking it to be smart or be cynical. I really just want to know, like, what happens if they leave? Do our prices go up? Because Waterloo, I would assume, so I don't know. So that's what I was just asking. Maybe it's not for a time now. We pretty much know where, right now they'll do valuations. Right now we know where we're at, but like, how does this affect us in the long run when you take away the second largest payer of this system? That's what I wanted to know.
Oh, yeah, you're not alone in that. I think that's something others of us have considered, because you do want to know that impact and what it does and what the ripple effect would be to us as communities as far as our budgets and, absorbing that difference. But I don't know, it doesn't sound like this has probably ever come up before since the consolidation is what I'm assuming, but I don't know if there was ever some discussion on this prior to my time being on the commission. If any members on the commission remember anything like that being discussed.
Some agency, Waterloo several years ago, talked about the potential of leaving consolidated communication based on the formula and how it was set up, and
I think Cedar Falls has before too.
Yes.
I think both communities have, so I don't know if that was ever discussed then, what the impact would be.
but I don't think anybody's ever gone this far. I would anticipate that you still need to maintain the system, so there's no less cost there. There may be less of a cost in personnel, but that's not going to offset what needs to be paid to maintain the system. So I venture to say overall, costs for everybody would go up.
Mayor Green, I don't mean to really put you on the spot, but I was going to say, obviously, you probably are considering going on the state system. Are you looking at other options as well, and what are your thoughts if we as a group are looking at other options, or how interested are you in that if we all do it?
Yeah, it's a big question mark right now, mainly because of, these are decisions that are going to have to be made by the next mayor and by a bunch of new council members, and we don't know what those are going to look like. I would just say, knowing Cedar Falls being fairly conservative when it comes to finances, the whole question is, from our seat, can we have more useful coverage for Cedar Falls if we're tied into the state system? We're also tied to UNI and the state troopers. So I am really basically in a holding pattern right now. I'm really disappointed that the supervisors aren't really enthusiastic about the EMA levy for the county, because that would solve all of these problems for us.
I guarantee you that. Yeah, that would solve the problems for the cities, but I'm not sure it solves the problems yet.
Right. So just know that that's where we're at. Is it's not a bluff or an attempt to try to negotiate a better deal or anything like that. It's just saying, can we have more useful coverage and spend our money better if we have to chunk down $1 million a year? Is it better for us to do it locally? And so I'm going to pass all this information on to whoever gets elected in November for them to look at, and certainly take the strong recommendations of our public safety department and our finance department, so that it is as little of a political decision as possible, and is just hopefully a cut and dried. Here's what the data shows and is best for the city.
Yes. While you're looking out what's best for the city, we're looking out for what's best for the county. Same taxpayers, obviously, that we all have to consider and we all work with. But, yeah, lots to be considered. So you would still be involved or included if we were to start meetings on other options and do things quarterly?
Oh, certainly.
Or would you rather
Certainly.
we wait until you have new mayors and council in place? And that goes for some of you maybe that have changes in terms and council people too. I don't know. But that sounds like to me even another reason why we wouldn't be ready to do it in 25 if it were we having all these options, that we have a lot of different players perhaps. I don't know.
Well, and one thing that many mayors aren't aware of is the County Board of Supervisors recently agreed to invest $800,000 into the Sheriff's Office IT. The Sheriff's Office IT system is the backbone for every public safety entity in the entire county. So we're going to put a minimum of $800,000 into it, probably more. And there's this, it sounds like there may be annual operating costs of about $200,000. And we're asking the cities for nothing. We're not coming to.
But 90% of the county's budget comes
I have the
from.
floor, Madam Chair.
Yes, please.
I apologize.
Oh,
I have the
thank
floor, and we are going to invest this money into the backbone of our system. And every community in Blackhawk County is going to benefit from that. Ambulance, fire, police. And I don't know what's inaccurate about it, but that's my opinion. And I believe the majority of the board, if not all the board, agrees with that assertion. We're going to improve the system to make it better for all.
Mr. Choka, I apologize for interrupting you.
It's all right. Yeah, I think you are able to speak now, or you want to, Mr. Hart.
Yeah, my questions in the beginning was not to create any type of back and forth. I was just wondering about the future, and that's why. So I'm certainly done asking questions, but do we know what the process is if cities want to, since this never happened, so if Cedar Falls or in Evansdale or somebody says we want to move to changing things up a little bit, like is there a process, paperwork, or like does anybody know since this is uncharted territory?
And when you say paperwork, as it relates to.
Because you have to give a year's notice, right?
Correct.
Like what does a city have to do?
To present that, you mean to, like they'd give the notice to the officially to the, I guess, to dispatch or communication center board.
I think the oversight board.
Yeah, that's what I
Would it
was
do to
wondering.
the oversight board?
I think
Yes.
Rather than, it would be us? Okay, well, thank you. Did you hear that, Mayor Hart? That it was like the 12-month notification would be presented to the oversight board?
Okay, thank you. Yeah, that was all. Certainly wasn't trying to go in a different direction, just had some general questions, so.
Oh, no, that's what today's for, I think. There have been several questions, I think. We've all kind of wondered about different parts of this, and that's what we wanted to bring forward today. And if we can get them answered, fine. If there are more questions or things we need to come back with, we can certainly do that as well. So, no, I think the impact, I think you brought up an important question. As we lose a partner, what would be the backup for how would we handle that? And one would just assume, I guess, I'm thinking you'd just look at the budget, you'd see what you needed, and it would be split differently, but that's just me. Yes, Mr. Wessel.
George Wessel, Mayor of Hudson. Just a couple questions,
Please.
or a question.
We have,
There's a reason.
Oh, could you get to the mic, please? I was going to say, just so sometimes I'm not sure the Zoom people can hear as well as.
George Wessel, Mayor of Hudson.
Thank you.
A question to the supervisors. Is the reason that you're unwilling to look at a countywide EMA levy because by valuation calculation, instead of the prior 80-20 or 90-10, that the county's assessment for the consolidated communication. It went up from, I think, somewhere around 240,000 that it jumped up to close to 500,000? Or is it because that the Board of Supervisors is unwilling to explain to the citizens of the entire county as well as the cities why the impact is directly to county citizens based upon the valuation? That's my questions. Because I think we have talked about a countywide EMA levy for a long time, as opposed to it just coming up and needing to spend a year to figure out the paperwork.
I'll answer that.
Go ahead, we can all,
And I'm just speaking on my behalf.
yeah.
And I've supported a county EMA levy for years. And I would still support it if, let's say let's say the county taxed the citizens $3 million more annually. Would each city be willing to lower the taxes to their citizens by that much? And I don't think we'll get that guarantee. The way it was presented to us, I didn't feel like it was taxation without representation. A group of mayors was going to tell the Board of Supervisors, here's the tab, you got to pay it. And we had no say in it. That made me very uncomfortable. And then we have to answer to the citizens. And boy, did we hear it when the assessments came out. And we, the board is the board that deals with the assessments, and that office is an autonomous board. But there were even people on Facebook saying, hey, you want to complain about your assessments? Contact the Board of Supervisors. So we hear about it. These are sensitive times when it comes to taxing our citizens, without a doubt. And I personally just felt like the mayors were passing the buck with the Board of Supervisors, and that's where you lost my support for an EMA levy.
Let's see.
Madam Chair?
Speaking for myself, some of my concern really comes into not the job of explaining, like, so if we would transfer this burden from the cities to the county, I'm comfortable explaining that. But what's been all over the place in terms of clear answers is, you know, what that does to our own county levy and our ability to tax to provide the services that we currently provide and the services that we need to, whether it's the health department or all the other departments, conservation and everything. So at the same time, you've got the state passing laws that limit the amount by which we can grow the amount that we're taxing, and we're talking about at the same time switching this large burden from the cities to the counties solely. It hasn't been explained clearly enough by anybody about what would that limit us from even providing services that we're currently providing, or how does that limit our growth, going forward? And that's the big question for me is our, do we even have, can we even grow our tax rate enough to even take on this whole service without having to make cuts in other departments and not having the ability to grow in other departments as we need to?
And I'll add to, as I said months ago, I know you used the phrase, George, unwilling. Are we unwilling? And I said I was always willing to look at the EMA levy, even up to a certain point for fiscal year 24. And I was doubtful early on that we were, in that budget cycle for 24 that it could work. And maybe that's just because I didn't feel I had the information. I would say it's not that I'm unwilling to look at it or consider it as an option. It's that I didn't feel a case was made enough for me to say this is the best way to do it, whether it was a mix of the communities and the county, whether it was the county doing it. I never liked the fact that it seemed to be, and it took up that speed as we were trying to do this for fiscal year 24, that it was the communities trying to make the decision on how much was needed and what the budget should be for the levy, and the supervisors needed to do it. and we had very little say in what that was, and it would be the county that would have to assume that responsibility to the taxpayers of why that happened and why we were doing this. And to me, we just didn't have the things in place if that was the best route to go. And so that's why I'm very open to what are the options out there, what are other communities doing. We knew there were several, not a lot, that were doing the county EMA levy, and that was working, and that's what had us looking and trying to do homework at the kind of last minute while we were in budget times to see, you know, what do we do in this and how does this work, and gain that information. But that was just the tip of the iceberg that the staff and I for certain would say that we touched on, so it wasn't enough information to make a decision to say, yeah, it works for Scott County, so we're going to do it, and we're going to do it the same way they are, and this is how. And some of the ones, I think it was Scott, wasn't it, that mentioned to us, those of you, my memory's failing me, said, you know, they'd worked on it for years. There were at least a couple of years.
7 years, I
said. Well, yeah, one was, and that was involving a building and some of those types of things, but there was still that they had worked for the working relationships and how it was going to work, and everybody being involved that needed to be going forward. So it wasn't like something that we thought, oh, gee, we can do this now and get it done in 24. And that's why I said in 25, if that's what we wanted to take that time to look at these options, and state system being one, but others, and anything anybody else would bring to us if there are other options they'd like to see us consider. And I'd be very open, and I don't know about fellow supervisors, how they'd feel about hiring a consultant or someone that would help us evaluate that, because we're all very busy people and don't have the time to do it ourselves, and say, you know, what are options out there for communities? I don't know, but it's just having enough information to make the decision to say, yes, I go with the county levy. I wasn't there. Still not. That's what I'm trying to do. But not unwilling to look at it. I'm sorry the other two aren't here to speak today, but.
Well, there was a general consensus, I know, in my conversations individually with supervisors. I didn't get much of a chance to talk to Chris about it, but I did get a chance to talk with Tavis, communicate with Tom and Linda. And we felt it was just necessary to let the mayors know, stop hanging your hat on it happening next year. Because I, for one, don't see it happening next year.
Yeah. I think there were comments made kind of different times in different meetings saying, you know, okay, we're willing to do this for a year, when we made the property valuations, and it was just like, well, not that the group couldn't look at doing it differently next year. I'm sure that's something that's open for discussion as an EMA commission, but it was just not for everybody to be dependent on, like, as long as that happens, we'll do this type of thing. We wanted to make sure we were clear on that. So. Any questions or comments? I mean, this is to be discussion with all of you and want your input and that type of thing. I think the more communication, the better, the easier we can resolve things or what we should do or going forward.
You know, for years I've looked at the formulas. When I was Waterloo's police chief, I didn't like the calls for service formula. When I first became chief, we were handling 85,000 calls for service per year. We changed some processes. And actually, crime is down in Waterloo, regardless of what people say on Facebook and in the media. It's gone down in the past decade. But Waterloo is now handling 58,000 calls for service. Some of these small towns, I feel their pain when it comes to calls for service, because if you have two young, aggressive officers that are making a tremendous amount of traffic stops, your calls for service explode. And if you're paying 18, 19 bucks for every call for service generated, your costs go through the roof. I still don't know what the best formula is, or most fair. And like I said, no matter what's decided, somebody is going to think it's unfair. But we collectively, with frequent communication, I'm hoping eventually we can reach a consensus. But we need to have open, honest dialogue. We need to have all the information that's out there presented to us and make a decision. I don't want to see consolidated dispatch fall apart.
How willing, I guess, are you as members to explore options, or are you just sold on the county EMA levy? That's the decision and the route to go for you, so you're really not interested in other options or other arrangements, or are we on that kind of a, I guess, divide, that it's either the county levy or nothing, or we continue doing what we do, or?
Madam Chair?
Oh,
So you're in a different position though at the county, because you make these decisions on your own, like as the board, for what you want to do. For the cities, like, it's not just what I want to do. It doesn't matter me telling you what my personal opinion is. It's what my council is willing to support and what they're going to advocate for. So I can't tell you right now what Cedar Falls is going to do.
no.
And I hope that you're not looking for that.
No, I'm not looking for that. I'm looking for, in finding the solution. You were part of the EMA commission, and that's probably a part of this, but more importantly, like, it's the role of the oversight board to be.
It sounds like, to follow up, I mean, it doesn't sound like the EMA, the commission, has much of a role here at all. It's just the oversight board, and it doesn't, I mean, I appreciate you'll take into account what the EMA's, the commission's opinion is on this, but it sounds like this is much more driven by the folks in this room separately.
Yes,
Yeah.
And
I think we all agree. Yeah, I think that's kind of been the issue, is it's kind of was always being driven from an EMA commission standpoint, and this is where the conversation
Yeah.
should be occurring, and the discussion and solutions.
Which is where, and because of the EMA levy, I believe that's where it should be. I mean, it's kind of a dueling body, but I mean, I don't know how to put it. I want to be like honest with you. You're asking for honest feedback. I feel like in this kind of a meeting, we're being asked to follow the behest of the supervisors. Like, this is your show, and we're here as sub people. And maybe it's even just part of the room setup, that you're up there at your usual chairs, and the mayors are in the public seat. I mean, it just doesn't feel like a very collaborative body to me.
Well, we can change that. I mean, they don't all have to be meetings held this way. That's just, yeah. I mean, I won't speak for every board member,
No.
but I was going to say, we've talked about
Yeah,
other
the next one
meetings
should
that
just
we'd
be
like to have,
in a conference table.
because we want everybody to feel comfortable, yeah.
Mayor Gaston from LaPorte. To back off of that, now that he said it, I do, as being a new mayor and new to the situation and new to the process, I absolutely feel as though I'm back here, I don't get to make any decisions. Yes, you'll take feedback, but I don't feel like we really have a working relationship where we can talk and work through things. And I appreciate when you say, well, let's meet quarterly. No, let's meet monthly. If we're going to investigate this and we're going to look at options, and I'm totally fine looking at options, but if we make it take 15 years to look at options, nothing's ever going to get better, and it is going to fall apart because we're taking too long to look at the options. And I know everyone's busy. I have a full-time job on top of all of this as well, and I get it. But if we continuously just talk and talk and talk in a meeting, and then we don't do anything in between the meetings, nothing's getting done, and it's not helping any of our taxpayers. And as a small community, it is a huge deal to us to not have, say Cedar Falls leave and it all fall back on us. We can't, as a small community, we can't take that burden
We
on.
meet monthly because this is important.
Yep.
And especially now, like, I know certain times of the year are busier, budget's not a great time to meet monthly, but in the downtime in between, I think it would be worthwhile.
Great. So how do others feel? Yeah, good.
Dan Kobliska, City of Evansdale. Like we had said during budget time, it's not sustainable for the City of Evansdale to continue. If we lose, the second to the largest player with consolidated communication, it's going to be impossible for us to sustain. Our annual is going to be, upwards probably of $250,000 a year. Even if we reorganize and see what we can do differently as a community, and which we can. We're understaffed as well, just like most of us. It was discussed that, and I said my willingness, I put out my willingness. Let's get a committee together. If we need to go and visit with the people in Scott County, let's do it. Let's start now. Like Jasmine said, let's meet monthly. Let's meet maybe at a round table or whatever, as work sessions on how can we make this better for everybody. It doesn't mean, if it's an EMA levy, it's a county levy, if it's a city levy, it doesn't matter. It's got to get better.
Thank you.
And one suggestion I made to other supervisors is maybe we should put dispatch make them a separate department under the Board of Supervisors with an autonomous board like we do with other boards, the health board, conservation board. But I want the mayors to have skin in this game. If we set it, and I mean, that might look good from the outside, but I'm thinking, I want the mayors and their communities to have skin in this game to try to control these costs.
Well, I think
This
then
is
the
the
mayors
cost.
want it. Oh, sorry.
I like to say, and all of us, you probably feel the same way. I'm a taxpayer sitting on this board, and like the costs aren't sustainable. And I want the mayors and I want your communities to have skin in this game so we can control these costs. I don't know how we control them, but we have to.
Well, I think as consolidated communications, the mayors probably all want that role or some role because it's about your communities, so it wouldn't be just the counties doing it. So I think that was some more discussion. Mayor Shares, you're pretty quiet over there. I was going to say, you've known this a long time.
I've
Yep.
known it a long time.
Yeah.
We're all Blackhawk County citizens.
Yep.
We all live in Blackhawk County.
So how
Deal
do you feel about the monthly meetings then?
Let's go for it, try to get something solved. It didn't get solved way back when we voted to have a consolidated communications. We didn't get it probably set up very well. This is what we have because
Any other comments? And it doesn't just have to be from mayors, for those of you that are in the room that want to. Oh, Judy, go ahead. I was going to say, this is like a work session.
I certainly appreciate all the comments that are made. I've been with the center since it consolidated. I've worked with many mayors, many chiefs, and as a chief of police, I understood your concerns about how things were broken out. We have looked at so many different valuations and variations for billing. When we first consolidated, it was tax, population, calls for service. It went through so many different methods. And costs are going up, and I don't know how to control that as far as the operations of the center. I mean, we are understaffed. I've had some conversations with Amanda as of late, and how to address that so that we can provide the service that we need to provide to our agencies and to our citizens. And so I think I'm glad to see that maybe we'll have more meetings so that we can try to resolve it. We're doing things, within the center itself as far as all of how the equipment works and how our servers and everything with the new software. And one of the things I think, Dan, that maybe you're not aware of, but we are bringing all public safety software downstairs. So even the current system, because it's eventually got to be there anyway, and some of the connections have to be there anyway, and we have the infrastructure now in place to set up those servers. We already have the virtual networks, and we've been working with Al to make that happen as well. So our plan is, and I think the consolidated board, or actually 911 board and CJIS will be meeting next week to make the decision to bring all of that infrastructure downstairs so that when we do go live with the new system that it's already in place. But I don't know what the answer is for the valuations or for the funding of it. I know Cedar Falls, years ago when Rick Ahlstrom was the chief, they brought a consultant in and looked at having their standalone center and going back to having their own setup, and I don't believe it was cost effective. And, but again, that was how many years ago? So I don't know what the answer is. I can just tell you that I'm willing and very much want to see this work out. I don't want to see any agency leave. I think we have a good center. I think we provide a good service to all of our citizens and to the agencies that we do provide service for. So anything I can do to help, I just want you to know that I am more than willing to do whatever I can to answer any questions, provide whatever information that you need as well.
I have a question for you, because I think as the longest person probably involved with this, like I say, with the history, when initially that was decided, I assume, was it by the Oversight Board for what that, when you say you explored population and calls and that type of thing, even to establish that, were those decisions made?
So originally when it was consolidated, and I was not here when they were going through that process of consolidating. My first day was the day they actually opened the center in December of '95. But looking back at the history, I want to say that was made by the consolidated board through the chiefs, through input. I think they went back to their mayors, and there was a lot of involvement with the board of supervisors and the mayors and the various boards. And then I want to say when it was several years down the road that the oversight board was created. Originally, there was not an oversight board. And that was created, I don't remember what year, the 2080 changed, and they added the oversight, they added the personnel board, so that there was more involvement from the mayors as well. So, and at that point, I think we had looked at the board, the consolidated board looked at the calls for service, and they felt that was fair at that time. And then here a few years ago, it was brought up, maybe we should look at population and calls for service with the goal eventually of getting to 50% population, 50% calls for service. And I think we were still at the 80-20. I think the thought was that this year it would have went to 70-30 to keep working towards that 50-50.
Okay, that's what, I wasn't sure who was making that, decision makers for that.
Back then, I believe it was the consolidated board along with, actually it was probably more of the 911 board, because they were the ones that actually worked to put the consolidation together, and then the consolidation, or the consolidated board evolved out of that.
Okay, thanks. I was just curious because I said I knew it started somewhere with a group having to vote and 2080 agreements
Right.
and that type of thing, that most of us didn't have that history.
Right,
for when
and
it all
like I
started.
said, I've gone back and combed through the historical files that I have and tried to piece it together, but that's my recollection, so.
Okay. Thank you, Judy.
I think, Michelle, before we have this next meeting, there's a couple scenarios I want to flesh out, because I do understand how taxing as a county body for a county-wide service does make a lot of sense in some ways. But what I need to be able to get my head around is using the numbers from this most current budget that we're about ready to enter the year for, what it would have done to our budget that year. Would we have even been allowed to even grow enough to be able to tax that amount? And two, like the other one would be some form of, that's a county-wide levy, but with some type of user fee or access fee coming from the cities to help offset some of that. Just those two different.
So I'm thinking you really want that based on the new property tax law, because that's where all those
Yeah,
limitations
exactly.
come in.
Yep.
All right, and all those details aren't released yet, but I can guesstimate some things.
So we could use our most current budget numbers, but under the limitations of the new property
Figure
tax
out.
law.
And I'm sure whatever I guesstimate will be wrong, but I can at least give you some ideas.
Because what I'm getting at is I need to know, is it even possible to do without having to make cuts to the health department or cuts to elections or cuts to conservation, or be able to not have enough room to grow in those departments like we need to in the coming years.
So you're asking for answers to that before we even have our first meeting, just so we walk in?
Yeah, so that we have all that information for everybody before the next meeting.
Great. Anything else we want to, or anything any of you would like to have, or from a planning standpoint for our next meeting? Mayor Green? I see. Oh, maybe you weren't shaking your head.
No, just plan for an EMA levy. That's all I'm asking for. Countywide.
Can we ask why?
Yeah, we can. Did you hear the question?
Me?
Yes. Did you hear the question?
Yes. I mean, is this news to people for why we should have an EMA levy?
Well, let me ask you this. If you were a county supervisor and not a mayor,
yes,
why would you think this is a good idea for the county to do?
Because the Consolidated Dispatch Center is serving the entire county. We have this push now for a valuation based entirely. So for Cedar Falls to then have to annually say, Are we going to approve the budget? It just takes for all of individual cities this continual churn, this uncertainty for what we're going to do for our funding for EMA. I mean, it comes up every year. It's a massive political issue of, do we do 20% and 80% calls for service or 20% valuation or population base? The EMA levy, it's what it's designed for. This is not an exotic concept that we're trying to come up with our own. The state legislature created it specifically to handle. And I've thought ever since I was on city council, why the heck aren't we using the EMA levy to pay for this? So yes, it's politically tough at the start. Residents will get used to it. I can't commit to the next mayor of what they'll do, but I would, as a taxpayer in Cedar Falls, I would be up in arms and at the council meetings if the city didn't lower its internal rate to adjust for the fact that the county is covering the pool cost for the valuations. So this has got my blood pressure up for the past several months. I know for other mayors it has too, because for us it's a no-brainer to do this. And we thought that it was settled, and the supervisors came in and said, no, you don't have the authority to do it. So I feel like we're solely like hat in hand coming at the behest of the supervisors, and it's not supposed to be that way.
Well, you refer back to EMA, obviously. And we've always funded EMA, and I don't think it's ever been a problem. I don't think that's ever been something that we've had in jeopardy. So what you're talking about, though, is dispatch for the most part. Correct?
Correct.
And still, as you said, you identify, though, yes, for the mayors have the churn, we would have the same churn. We have to make the same decisions, although the way it was proposed this past few months was that the decision would be made for us and we would just have to tax the residents, which doesn't seem probably, I think, like a good partnership. But nobody seemed open to how else we would propose to work through this. So it was like county do it and move forward. And I think, as I've said different times, that was going to take more communication, more discussion, but it seemed like when everybody thought there was the impetus there for the state to pass the EMA levy, it was kind of like, well, we're on this track and this is where we're sticking and we don't need to discuss it or have these discussions. So that's why everybody being open to that, or it sounds like most people are, seems to be that we are in the right place. But while you say you believe the evaluations is the fairest, I can tell you we are contacted by other people who don't believe valuations are, and particularly probably from our rural constituents as well as farmers. There are people that don't believe they should be taxed based on this and that that's fair to them. So that's why, to me, there were several aspects of this that more information was needed. Maybe it was,
and I wouldn't say it's the most fair. I would just say that it's what the mayors and from some of the early discussions, it's what we landed on as the most practical way of annually providing a predictable amount of money to dispatch every year for that expensive cost. And so again, if it ties for valuation, if that's something that the city's responsible for, I have to look at, okay, can we do something more effective for Cedar Falls in that approach?
Sure. Well, we want to do something most effective for our Blackhawk County as well. So we all just have different hats and we look at the role a little bit differently, but ultimately it affects our citizens the same, correct?
Well, I feel like we're talking in circles here at this point, so
Okay.
I'm not going to say anything further.
Hey, Madam Chair.
I don't mean to talk in circles, I just mean there's more than one opinion of the valuations being the only way, that's all. Sorry, Mayor. Yes?
Hey, Linda.
Yes?
You know, first off, I honestly believe if Mayor Green was sitting as a county supervisor, his thoughts would be completely different. Second
Madam
point,
Chair, point of order.
I'm
I would ask that he not ascribe motives to me, please, whoever this person is.
Let me finish talking. I didn't interrupt you, Mayor Green.
I called a point of order due to.
Yeah.
So please, Madam Chair, I would ask that you enforce decorum here, please.
Oh, we just need to identify who's speaking, is that what? Yes. Would you just identify the speaker, Mr. Little?
This is Supervisor Tom Little. Second, I believe when the communication center was started, and I could be wrong, somebody in that room that's been around a long time can correct me, but I believe each entity had, most of the entities had their own dispatching. I know the city of Evansdale did. And when they combined it together, it was an agreement back then that everybody would share the cost. And I believe that's how it got to that point. And then also a few years ago, if I recall, the city of Cedar Falls cut their service calls or something. I don't know. I'm not familiar with the system, which drastically reduced their cost. So they actually dropped their costs years ago, and now I think it just caught back up with them again. I don't know what the just thing is either. Judy, you mentioned having trouble hiring staff. The whole country's having trouble hiring staff. Have you used our HR 5 years ago? I thought you were just doing everything on your own and not going through our HR.
No, we've always gone through HR, Tom.
Okay.
Yes,
Okay.
Yep.
So what's the answer? You know, the mayor, I believe, talked about also about they passed something, but the board turned it down. The board wasn't even involved. We didn't know nothing about it until it was thrown at us. So there's a lot of reasons why. I think it's a complicated situation. We're going to have to think through it. But I'll tell you what, in this day and age, with the way things are going on right now, with jobs and stuff, each city is trying to qualify their budgets every year to keep the taxes as low as they can. And we throw this county levy on them at this time, and you know it's going to be a hardship on a lot of people in Blackhawk County. It may be necessary someday, but right now, I think we've got some other concerns. And the last thing I got is the Oversight Board. I thought, and probably wrong, but I thought that was coded, created by code. We had no choice. That was the Iowa Code created the Oversight and the conference board that the board deals with.
You want to speak to that?
I believe that, and I would have to double check, but I believe that there's a 911 board or 911 commission that's created statutorily. I don't believe the Oversight Board is created statutorily.
Okay.
Question for Michelle.
Okay, good, yes.
Yep.
Michelle, I've got TIF districts. Is there a mechanism for us to generate revenue from TIF districts to support consolidated communications that you're aware of?
So I don't believe it can support operations. I mean, I think we all need to go back and remember why dispatch was created, and it was for a really good reason. Mr. Little was, I think, probably correct. Everybody used to have their own dispatch center. They all need to be manned 24/7. Some communities had fewer calls, particularly certain prime times of the week or day. So it was felt that it would be less expensive and more effective for all of us to have one system and work together for the operating. Now, we talk about TIFs can be a help with the capital costs. So for example, the county, even though the county, when you look at the statistics, the county has 9% of the population, 10% of the calls, only 17% of the actual property value, and I'm limiting that to our rural value because that's separate from the cities. The county did pay, I think, about $9 or $10 million for the 7 towers that are used by everyone in this system for the radio contact. That did access TIF because we paid for it with the debt service levy, as I understand it, and so that does allow you to access the TIF valuation. That can only be used for capital. So if it's for operating, which is I think what we're primarily talking about, then TIF does not enter into that. So it's difficult, and in my mind, one of the issues that has to be worked out is when we are only the third, when the county is only the third highest user of the system in almost any way that I calculate it, to ask the county to pay 100% when we aren't the user. We need a lot of buy-in from the users of the system about how to be efficient and effective, and how do you design a system where all the players have a role and can say what they need and make sure they get the service they need, and yes, work together on it, because it needs, you're right, it's almost impossible to say fair, but we do need to, someone needs to figure out an equitable way, whether that's a consultant or something. Maybe the method just, I don't know what the right method is, but maybe somehow we need to figure out a new method. It's hard for me to believe, I guess, that it would be more cost effective for everybody in this room to have to go off on their own again. I do know when this was set up, there wasn't the state system, so we do owe it to ourselves and our taxpayers to investigate how that would work. And maybe that's a better deal, and maybe it isn't. But we should look at it, I think, from a financial perspective.
Madam Chair?
Yes. Yes, Mayor.
So if it, I just want to say, throughout this process and from a year or so ago when we did the study, if it had come to the Board of Supervisors as if the cities want to just push this on you without you having your locus of control, I want to be the first one to apologize. I think I've been mayor for about 7+ years. I've worked with Supervisor Trelka. But what it seemed like is when it came time for us to be able to set the budget, or when we went from 90-10 to 80-20, calls and population, or however we did it, there wasn't, I don't remember there being a lot of Board of Supervisor engagement other than when we voted to figure out how we pay for it. It came to you. So I apologize if but it just seems like past practice that there wasn't a lot of engagement. So that part was wrong. If that's the way it come off, so I apologize. But I think maybe one thing to think about as we move forward in this is that when we say, the county, you are in charge of, all of our areas, you're in charge of the ag area, but in a way it makes it seem like through this process that cities or the residents aren't the ones that actually help put up the towers. Like the money, the 7 towers or the $9 million, I think I heard, wasn't some of that money from the people that live in cities, or did that all come from rural areas, right, or unincorporated areas? And so, yeah, I feel, mutually responsible in what you have to do, but a huge percentage of the dollars that you're able to allocate every day with the great work you do comes from folks within incorporated areas as well. And you got to think about everything. So it's even a larger job. But, to me, when I hear the county paid for this, a large portion of those dollars did come from people within the cities. And so we do have a stake and we do support you. But if we could start on a basis that citizens in these cities are making payments too, that shouldn't hold you at bay and you being able to make decisions. But I would at least like to have that acknowledged when we go forward having these meetings. I mean, our citizens and people pay, Cedar Falls does well. They create great opportunities. They increase the tax base. Waterloo, Evansdale, that's all part of the monies that you use to help support all the incredible services you provide. But it just feels like that's kind of left out. It's like the county, but the county, we're all part of the county, and that's support all of you. But, that some money you spend come from cities too. And I remember, a conversation a while ago about with a staff member, some of the very money that comes to pay county staff comes from incorporated areas. So I support you. I'm looking forward to figuring out how we can find a way, if there is a way. But I just want to acknowledge a large portion of your budget that you're able to do the great work comes from incorporated areas as well. So thank you. I'm here to support, and I'm looking forward to a conversation in the future.
Madam Chair, this is Mark Tommy from Gilbertville. I haven't said very much at all today, but I think there's been a lot of good points. Mayor Hart just made several good points, but could we move forward here and just set up the meeting time? It seems as though we could talk the rest of the day on and on and on, but let's put our focus and our energy towards moving forward and getting these meetings set up so that maybe we have an outside chance at 2025 or whatever that date may be. And I agree that to look at all the possibilities, but could we get that process started? And again, I think everybody is more than willing to work together and looking forward to that. Thanks.
Thank you, Mayor Tomey. And I think it sounds like everyone in the room probably agrees with that as far as the moving forward, and the sooner the better. And I know we've given Michelle an assignment to kind of prepare, I guess, before that meeting. And I don't know if we should do some type of a poll or something to see what dates, times, and that type of thing work for us to going forward, because I know everybody's probably got busy schedules. Or input today would be helpful too. Otherwise, we can certainly just do something like a doodle poll or whatever and find out what dates and times work. Okay.
And Madam Chair, I need to drive to another meeting in 2 minutes. When I'm in my car, can somebody let me back into the meeting?
Yes. Yes.
Okay.
Go ahead. Thank you, Mayor.
Do you folks maybe want to take a look at just 1 month from today, which would be the 6th of July?
I don't know.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Since it is, the oversight is the mayor's and you, I would suggest that we meet maybe an hour before the EMA meeting, since we all need to be there for that as well. Just to be taken into consideration.
Yeah, I was going to say thank you. Appreciate that. Any ideas or thoughts too, anytime can be, shared too until we determine that. I just thought too, the best way to make use of our time with all the different individuals involved, I'm sure, but thank you. Yeah. Do mornings work for some though? I was going to say it seems to be, well, obviously today maybe everybody made an effort, but we'll just, that's why I thought maybe a doodle poll will at least flesh out mornings or afternoons or days. Okay.
It's a priority for me, so I'll make any time work.
Okay. All right. Is there any?
And I do want to go with the suggested meeting, in a different space so that everybody.
Oh
can
yeah,
sit there at
we
the
can certainly do that.
table.
Find out, what we have for meeting space availability. That's a great idea.
Madam Chair, is it possible to stay away from mornings? I know I'm only one, but believe it or not, I still have to work for a living, and being mayor of Gilbertville is not a full-time paying job. Sorry.
Okay, we'll keep that in mind, Mark. And even how about late mornings? Even, or just mornings? Period. Don't work for you.
Later morning is better, but in the afternoon, I think Deanne had a good time there, or a little later in the afternoon, even like 2 o'clock in the afternoon or something. But again, I'm only one person, so.
Sure. No, still important though, Mayor. Thank you. Thanks for pointing it out. That's what we need to kind of work with schedules. So that's great. Any other comments before moving on? I guess that statewide inoperability system kind of was wide open and all led to several other discussions. But before we go to the confirmation of the funding allocations, is there anything more anyone would like to add? All right, we'll move on then to item 5, confirm fiscal year 24 funding allocations. And I believe all of you were emailed and received probably the allocation, and I know Tim Jameson had sent it out earlier to the city clerks and finance people, and I said to him today if he may have comments on it as well. But there have been some questions, I think, from individuals wondering about how we proceed because of the 28E agreement and some things that were not signed and going forward with that. At our last EMA meeting, I know it came up, and if others have an opinion or thought on this, but it seemed like the allocations were voted on. Everybody saw those, received those, and everything kind of went forward from that. They were put in the budgets for each of the communities. They are now certified budgets, probably for everyone. And so if you've had a chance to look at your allocation or would like, we have sheets available for anybody that doesn't remember or would like them. Otherwise, I guess I'm thinking today we probably wanted to at least confirm. I think there were some questions at what if people don't pay their allocation or where we're at with that. Did we lose people? Okay, still on your side. Okay, all right, just here. So that was a question on if there were any questions, concerns about those allocations, if in fact the communities were planning to pay these amounts for their allocations. Please.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
just as the chair of the 911 board, we've done some small group discussion, and we'd be more than happy to take this back to our board on the 7th. Out of carryover for this year, we would entertain, or we would need to take it back to our board for a vote, but we would be willing to see if we could take at most 200,000 out of our carryover, and to where 911 would cover 200,000 of the maintenance costs for this next fiscal year. I'm not sure. I mean, we're as well willing to do whatever we can to help out. We just we don't need to set up ourselves for failure either. So that's a number that right now we're very comfortable with, I believe. And I'd be more than happy to take that back to my board on Wednesday for the vote.
There'd been no discussion about that, or I'd heard no comments or questions for anyone as far as you doing that or taking that back to your board. Appreciate that. I guess it's open for discussion if there's anybody that feels that's something we should take advantage of. Otherwise, we're not able to vote on it today.
No.
If that was something I meant for us, not that you couldn't do that. Are there any communities, I guess, that didn't feel that they would be making their allocation? That it wouldn't be all right to pay that? I know Tim's getting ready, and Tim, I didn't know if you wanted to comment a little bit on the process of what you'd be doing as far as based on the allocations that you've calculated, what your next step is, because that's coming up soon, correct? Tim?
Sorry, I missed that.
I said, based on the sheet that you provided, you mailed out earlier, everybody's seen it from a city clerks and finance standpoint, and the mayor's received it in the last couple of days, so they've at least seen that. The next step in this process, and what we were really kind of talking about today, because there had been some questions about what if communities didn't pay the allocation that was stated. But I said, you're getting ready to bill them July 1st or something like that, correct?
Yeah, we like to get the first payment by July 15th for the next fiscal year from everybody, so I need to get those invoices out if we've got a change in that budget sooner than later, so that we could make that adjustment, especially if there's additional revenue coming in.
Sure, that would be, so I guess from the community standpoint, though, we wanted to know for sure that they were willing to make their allocation. We're not. We're this offer from Chief Brecker. Is it Brecker? Is I pronounce that correctly? Or something they want to take advantage of. Like you said, that revenue would be great to apply, but I just thought otherwise everyone's prepared to make their allocation payment. No one's considering not.
I hope so.
And that's not, yes. And I just thought if so, we needed to identify that.
I don't think it's an option.
Well, I mean,
Yeah,
part of my
can be.
responsibility in the auditor's office is also to certify budgets, and from what I've seen, everyone actually is taxing for the amount that they were billed. So it's not to say
you're
that
anticipating.
they couldn't use that for something else, I guess, if they didn't pay us, but
No, but there had been questions from others wondering if those allocations weren't made, what would happen. So I was just assuming everybody would do that and there would be no surprises and everybody be confirmed that. But thank you. Mr. Mayor Wessel.
George Wessel, Mayor of Hudson. On behalf of Hudson, we will pay what's assessed. However, I have a question probably for Mr. Trinan, the Assistant County Attorney. We're operating under an existing 28E, correct? Under the 28E that we're operating under, there's a paragraph relative to financing. The paragraph relative to financing says that the allocation will be based upon a mix of population and calls for service. So my specific question to Mr. Trinan is, can the assessment be based upon taxable valuation? Simple question.
In my opinion, if the 2080 agreement is indeed amended and all of the participants sign on or otherwise agree to the amended 2080 agreement, then it can be financed by other means. However, by sign on or otherwise agree to, I mean this. My understanding is that the most recent written 2080 agreement is dated October 1, 2020. There have been other financing agreements, or at least one that has been agreed to since then that varies from that agreement. And based on the practice of the parties to that agreement, I think it could be said to be enforceable. Having said that, as for this particular coming fiscal year, the question at this point is whether everyone's signing on to this or otherwise agreeing to it. And I think that is what Chairwoman Leyland is getting at here in having this agenda item. Am I correct? Mm-hmm. We want to make sure everybody is going to practice in accordance with what was voted on by this board for funding for fiscal 24. So I hope that that answered your question.
It answers my question, I think. The question would be is, by what deadline would that have to be signed on? Because I think the most recent, that 2020 revision of the 28E, was that signed by everybody on the 2020 or not? Because if it was not, then my recommendation that I voiced previously, unfortunately at an EMA meeting, was that there be an amendment circulated just revising that specific paragraph to allow that specific paragraph to allow the option of assessment by taxable valuation, as opposed to attempting to get all of the entities to approve a complicated 28E revision.
I am looking at 8 signatures on the 2020 agreement. I believe that is all of the necessary signatures.
And that one also only has the paragraph relative to population and calls for service. Is that correct?
I believe so. I have not read it in detail.
Okay, then again, my recommendation, unless you feel that there's no legal hang-up here, is that we get an amendment signed by those 8 entities allowing for the assessed valuation.
And as a practical matter, I think we should have that, because at this point, my understanding is that our cities have already budgeted, made assessments. Tim just said that they're actually taxing in accordance with this agreement. So yes, I agree with that recommendation. I know I've talked privately with Supervisor Leyland about this as well.
Because the whole reason that I've been a proponent of going to taxable valuation was to make it simpler in the future and not get into arguments as far as whether it's 80-20, 90-10, or whatever. I've said it before, I'm a CPA by background. I do not believe valuation is the proper accountable assessment. I believe it should be a mix of population and calls for service, because anybody who's an accountant, from a cost accounting perspective, you've got a fixed cost and you got a variable cost. And the variable cost comes in my opinion, coming from calls of service. But because of having gone through these discussions for the last 8 years, I also agree with Mayor Hart that in some ways the communities that are a little bit better off should be helping support the overall Cedar Valley. So that philosophically is why I'm okay with evaluation, but that was on the basis that it would be within a county EMA assessment of some sort, with the expectation that if the citizens are paying increased at the county level, then yes, the Cedar Falls, the Hudsons, the Waterloos, and everybody else should be taking into account an offsetting reduction in their own city assessment where they were paying for it in the previous. I can't guarantee that would ever happen, but that would sure be my intent to try to accomplish in my municipality. Thank you.
So, yes.
So the board's attorney, Steve Widener, had drafted a new 2080 with the changes in there that talked about the valuation versus the population calls for service. And I think that has been sent out at least twice to the mayors and board of supervisors. So you all should have that for your councils. I don't know if any have signed it, but it has been sent out a couple times.
And I was going to say, yes, you probably have. I think Hudson was the one that had.
And I was just waiting for this meeting until we approved.
But I think it wasn't, I think the 28E agreement, the different version of that was a problem, so an amendment might be acceptable, as George proposed, or as we talked about. Mike, go ahead, weigh into it. Looks like
yeah, if you don't mind me saying, so Article 17, and this has been in one form or another a part of every one of these. I actually, when having a conversation with Tony one time, it occurred to him as well as to me that a party isn't a party to a 2080 if they don't sign on and agree to it. Now, in the past, I think people have treated it as a majority rule situation, and then they've said that, well, Cedar Falls, Waterloo, and the county have to sign on to any amendment for it to be effective. And of course, being a representative of the county, I would much rather leave that in there if we're going to have this kind of adoption language. But having said that, if a party isn't a party to it and doesn't sign on to it, I don't think it can be forced on them. Now, I think it would be a significant mistake for anybody to try to back out when budgets have been made. People have been acting in reliance on this at this point, and I don't even want to imagine how that would play out in court right now. But bottom line is, I think having this Article 17, it should either be removed or it should go back to the way it was previously. Because again, I'm not sure, or I don't think, it is my opinion that this is not, unless and until you have signed on to this agreement, it does not bind you.
And if they don't, if an agency doesn't sign the agreement, does that mean that they no longer want to be dispatched? And are they giving us our year's notice?
Yeah, and that's the other issue then. So what happens? Let's pretend that we have a holdout who says, look, I'm not going to sign this amended agreement. Well, then I think that what that does effectively is that puts the most recent prior agreement, it leaves that agreement in force. Now, my understanding is, some may say, okay, well, that's October 1, 2020. Well, I don't exactly agree with that. I think it is whatever we were acting in reliance upon this past fiscal year. So it is whatever the formula was. I don't 80-20. Yeah, I can't. Apologies, I've only heard it about 600 times now. I think it'd roll off my tongue, but it's this 80-20 formula that was in place for fiscal 22 that I think would continue to be in place if someone did not sign this. Now, again, I'm not making a prediction as to how this would play out in court, but I've done some research on amendment of 2080 agreements, and I cannot find an example of where a simple, a majority of participants can force an amended agreement onto another participant.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mayor Quentin.
For moving on, I think there's probably a lot of other things when we're going through this 2080 agreement we need to take a look at it. But for purposes right now, can we, if Mr. West, whoever makes a motion to change that from valuation, can we go ahead and move on that so that we can move this forward? We've already set our budget. We already voted. Is it possible for somebody to make a simple motion to change that piece like he indicated so that we can move forward, get the 2080 agreement to our council and get them signed?
We can't take action on that today, but we can certainly get some things in place to.
I mean, I can go back
actions.
to the board's attorney who drafted this, and the valuation is in there, and we can, based on your recommendation, remove that last article. Is it the last article?
Yeah, I would like to see Article 17 removed from it.
Okay. And why was that? Oh, never mind. We can discuss that later, Mike.
As long as I would have to, I'd make it subject to review of the final draft, of course, but it.
Of course. And I can also have him go direct with you as well.
Yep. You bet.
So it's something we can work on for the next time or whatever to get, because obviously we need to have something in place for the 2080 amendment or whatever we do. So yeah, going forward would be best. But it sounds like from a friendly environment here, everybody's planning to prepare or pay their allocation. So that's really what was, just to answer questions for any that were questioning whether or not that would happen. Correct on the part of Cedar Falls as well?
It's budgeted.
Yeah, thank you. Well, moving on to item 6, is there any other business to come before us today other than we'll all have to get back in touch with you with going forward and monthly meetings and 2080s and Michelle's information for us as far as impact on the county? Okay, hearing none. Motion for adjournment?
So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. All in favor?
Aye.
And thank you all for coming today.